I had a vacant land transaction in Northern California that had a 90-day time schedule. 60 days into the transaction, the buyer decided he needed the seller to carry one half of the purchase price. The buyer also needed to extend the closing date. So the real estate agents got working and negotiated an addendum to reflect the changes. One of the issues of this addendum was the extended closing date. The buyer had the right to review an appraisal within 45 days from the date the report was ordered. The closing date would then be 2 days after the appraisal was approved. What a convoluted way to set a closing date. So, when was the appraisal ordered? What date does the closing clock start ticking? No one could give me a definitive answer, but finally the buyer told us to use the date the negotiated addendum was drawn. Okay, we can do that. The extended closing date came and went, and still no signed documents from the buyer or hints of closing. However, we did hear that after all this time, the buyer was still negotiating new terms with the seller, and the seller was not happy. Put your money where your mouth is, or perform or cancel. That was the seller's response. I guess that response got the buyers moving. Within the space of a few hours, the buyers notified us that they were ready to sign docs and they were going to instruct their 1031 exchange company to wire the funds. They were doing a 1031 exchange? Didn't know that. Last minute notification. No matter, we roll with the punches. And this is where the story turns a little disconcerting. In the call with the exchange person, she put in her own demands to us. She told us that she would not send the money until we knew exactly when we were closing. I advised her that we didn't have a set date yet and were waiting for final negotiations between the buyer and seller and also for the buyer to sign their paperwork. But as the transaction was way over the time period, the buyer needed the exchange funds to be deposited so that he could show the seller that the buyer was putting their money where their mouth was. Her next demand was that once she sent us the money, if we did not close within the next 2 days, we had to send the funds back to her. Once we had the final closing date, we would then request the funds to be wired to us again. Her claim was that she needed to make sure her client's funds were protected if not used. Excuse me? This is when I became a little bit upset. Who is the client in this transaction? Until the buyer signs the exchange documents, which he hadn't, the exchange company is not even a party to my escrow and has no authority to act as the buyer and make such demands. Who is the escrow officer in this transaction? Who knows exactly what is needed to close this transaction? Is it she or is it I? And that wasn't even my biggest complaint. As an escrow agent regulated by the California Department of Financial Planning and Innovation, our greatest responsibility is the protection of our clients' funds and its use. Are exchange companies regulated by the government? Not at this time. Who was she to question our integrity in the handling of our clients' funds? Perhaps this person did not understand the escrow process or the constraints that we work under. First of all, the escrow company will request the funds when it is needed for the closing, but ultimately, the agreement or instructions to send them come from the client. We follow the instructions given by the principals, the buyer or the seller, not a third party. The exchange company does not have the right to dictate how escrow should handle the transaction, when the money should come in, or when it goes out. Once the funds are deposited into the trust account of this neutral third party escrow, the funds cannot be released unless all parties agree to in writing. Unless it is a lender who has specific instructions about using their loan funds, there is no such thing as, if you don't use it within 2 days, you need to return it to me. The transaction did close, but for a very short while, our transaction was on the brink of disaster as the seller threatened to cancel and the exchange company balked at sending us the funds without their demands being met. Unfortunately, this seemed like another case of lack of education and knowledge of the escrow process. You are not the escrow officer in the transaction. You don't get to dictate when the funds are needed or how they are to be handled. The exchange industry has a very close relationship with the escrow industry. Our industries try to understand each other's regulatory requirements. If not, how else can we guide and direct our mutual clients? It was important for this person to get herself educated regarding the escrow process. Another story of lobbying back missiles when working in the escrow trenches. This is Juliana too. Thank you for watching and listening. Be sure you subscribe to my Think Escrow channel so that you automatically receive new videos about the tips, drama, and the art of escrow. Thank you.